On this episode of the Wise Counsel Project, we conclude our interview with Georgia Governor Nathan Deal. Join us as Governor Deal provides wise counsel to men and women of faith. Just attended an All-Pro Dads Conference where Coach Tony Dungy was there talking to fathers about having them step up to be the leaders in the household. Right. What do you think we can do in Georgia to encourage the dads to be there so we can prevent the kids from going into the juvenile justice system to start with?
Well, that is one of those problems that has been a huge contributor to dropout rates in our high schools and to increases in certain categories in our prison population, is that they have not had a father figure in the home. And for young boys in particular, that sometimes poses a great threat to their future. To get fathers involved is not only the right thing to do, but it pays benefits for the entire family unit. And I appreciate what Tony Dungy and others are doing to try to increase that participation rate by fathers in their children's lives, not just boys, but girls as well. Right. Children need father figures, and sometimes that is the missing element. As we see the number of out-of-birth wedlocks occurring, we see that percentage of absent fathers continue to grow, and we need to reverse that trend.
And I know your wife Sandra taught for over 15 years in the public school system. You talked about your parents being teachers. And literacy is an important project that she as the First Lady has really been pushing.
Sure.
Well, we'll talk about literacy first, if you would, why you think that's important. I'd love for you to also address what other issues you see facing the young people here in Georgia.
Well, literacy is all important because we know that if a child does not read at third grade level when they leave the third grade, we spend a lot of money, time, effort, and tears trying to get them through the graduation lines. And many times we're not successful. We believe a focused effort early on to get children interested in reading and making sure that they do read and know how to do it effectively is very, very important. We put an emphasis on it. My wife has taken on the campaign of Read Across Georgia. As a teacher, she knows the importance of this. And she's now read to over 400 different schools in our state in all 159 counties, all 181 school districts, and she continues it every week. She is going and reading to young children. But there are other problems that we're encountering as well, and one of those is the drug problem. I mentioned to you that we're trying to divert nonviolent offenders and juveniles out of our system of either prisons or our RYDCs. Many of those that are in those categories have substance abuse problems, and we're continuing to see the involvement of younger children using drugs at a much earlier age than has historically been the case. Now, we are also seeing an increase in the use of prescription drugs that they're getting out of somebody's medicine cabinet. We've done a pretty good job in tightening up the laws to try to drive out the pill mills that were in our state, and I think we have been very effective in doing that. But we're being told by the law enforcement community that an ever-increasing percentage of people with drug issues are the unauthorized use of prescription drugs. So it takes a focused effort on the part of everybody, because if a child is getting pain pills out of their parents' medicine cabinet, then the parent needs to be a little more responsive and be more aware of what's going on, because those can be just as addictive, if not more addictive, than even illegal drugs. So that's why that issue is one of the real issues that faces young people and faces family units as well.
And please tell me we're not going to see a push for the legalization of marijuana in this state.
No, I do not believe that that is a solution. If we want to look at what's happening in Colorado, that is not a model that we need to have in our state.
Well, we talked about issues facing the young people here in Georgia. What other issues are we going to be facing in the state in the next 4 years?
Well, you know, we've come through some very difficult times. When I became governor, we were still in the midst of the Great Recession. But we have focused on creating jobs for the Georgia citizens, and we've now around 300,000 private sector jobs since I became governor. That's a huge number. Last year, there were only 5 other states that were ahead of us in terms of total job creation. 4 of the 5 were states that were 2 to 3 times larger in population than we were. So focusing on giving people good jobs, I think, is a critical element. And I have a little bit of a mantra, if you don't mind me saying it and sharing it with you. An individual who has a good job can support themselves. they can support their family, they can be charitable in their community, and they have less reason to ask government to do things for them. Now, I believe that is not only conservatism in action, it is Christianity in action. People need to have the ability to support themselves, and at the core of that is a job.
Some advice, if I may, and we'll start with, what was the greatest advice that your parents imparted to you?
I suppose the greatest advice was not necessarily verbal advice, but just encouragement. I know that the Bible enumerates various gifts of the Spirit. I think one of the greatest gifts of the Spirit is to be an encourager. That's what parents should be. They should encourage their child as my parents encouraged me. Be the best at what you want to be. Explore what your talents lead you to be able to do. And don't be afraid to risk being a failure. The ones who are afraid to take a chance are the ones who never fully reach the potential that God intended them to have. My parents were encouragers, and the best advice they ever gave me was, don't quit. If you're going to take something on, don't quit. See it through to a logical conclusion, and then have the courage to grow. Be willing to expand your mind. Be willing to expand your capacity to understand things that you never thought you would be involved in. My parents were great inspirers for me.
That's great advice, Governor. How about the best advice that you have tried to pass on to your kids and grandkids?
I've tried to pass on the same thing. We have 4 children, as you pointed out, and 6 grandchildren, and they're all different. My children range from everything from our son being a Superior Court judge, who, by the way, is a drug court judge and is doing great things in that capacity, to 2 daughters who are actually trained in the arts for acting and for performing, and then a middle daughter who is a businesswoman. They all have different talents. They all have different interests. And it doesn't matter, whatever your interest is, take it on with vigor and with passion, and be the best that you can be in whatever you attempt to do. That's my advice to them. And wherever possible, my wife Sandra and I tried to not only encourage them, but to help them as they go along their path in their life.
That's great advice. One final question, if I may, Governor. When all's said and done, what do you want your legacy to be?
Well, I've never been one of those that thought a lot about a legacy. I think if you do what's right and you confront issues and don't run away from them, I believe that will be the greatest legacy you can have. I do believe, however, that the programs that we've put in place during my administration of focusing education on employment, of making sure that children and parents who spend a lot of money getting their children to go to college and get degrees are going to be in areas where jobs are available in Georgia, and that they don't have to leave our state in order to get a job. That keeps families together. It allows grandparents to see their grandchildren when their children have not had to move out of the state. I think my legacy also will be the fact that I have a caring heart. I take on issues that many people say are not important, that they're not politically correct. I was told when I announced I was going to take on criminal justice reform that was a risky thing for a Republican governor to do. My answer was, but it's the right thing to do. If you do the right thing, the politics will take care of itself. That's exactly what's happened. We passed in 2 separate years major criminal justice reform without a single dissenting vote in the House or the Senate. The third leg passed with only 3 dissenting votes, which is virtually a unanimous vote. I believe if you're on the right side of issues, that's the best legacy that you can ever have.
Well, Governor, as the saying goes, your actions speak so loud, I can hardly hear what you're saying. So thank you. You are leading by example, and thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you. Thank you for allowing me to be with you.
All right. Thanks for listening to today's episode of the Wise Counsel Project. If you enjoyed it, please consider rating us on iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher Radio. And for more information about the Wise Counsel Project, visit us on the web, wisecounselproject.com. You can also follow me on Twitter @Gary Martin Hayes. Thanks for listening, and God bless.